we're back. Next we have Gary. Sorry, you got a new name.
That's
How
all right.
about Gary Sechrist, KASB here. We're going to do some short-term and expectation goals for 2020. So with that, welcome.
You bet. Well, thank you for having me here. I really do appreciate it. I think, am I the only one that's color-coded with my mask?
Yeah.
Not bad, huh?
Nice.
My wife, she takes care of me. All right, so today, congratulations on your superintendent hire. So this is the final portion of our superintendent search. We think it's really important that the board and the superintendent kind of understand what the short-term goals are, what your expectations of him. And then the hard thing is I'm going to ask him to write some expectations of the board. Now that's kind of awkward because you're his boss, you don't have to do it, but it's sure nice to have that communication down. We're also going to have some short-term goals identified by the end of the evening. And the reason for that is that way he will know what you want him to hit the ground running. Because if he hits the ground running going this way, you want him to go this way, we've already got some unmet expectations. So we're going to try to get through all of that. So with that said, we're going to be pretty informal, so if you have any questions, feel free to just say, Gary, you're talking too quick, or you're too close to me, or whatever it is, and I'll back off. This is really hard for me, by the way. I think some of you that know me, I just assume you'll look over your shoulder on certain things, but I can't. So with that said, you guys are forming a new team, and it's very, very important. So I want you to think about what are the attributes, any great team that you've ever been on, and obviously it does not have to be an athletic team. It could be a committee that you work on down in the community. It could be something at work, could be at home. But what were some of the attributes of that great team? And I'll give you about 15 seconds, and then hopefully a couple of them just start throwing out some traits, some attributes of that great team that you can remember being part of it. Obviously, Mr. Crenshaw, if you can remember anything, also feel free to throw them out. I did put in front of you, I hate to say it, educational terms not very good, a worksheet, but if you're the type of person that likes to doodle or make notes to yourself, feel free to fill that out. I'm also not going to take it and grade it or look at it, so I'll not know. But who'd like to throw out a term that great team?
Good communication.
Okay, good communication, absolutely. You bet. Thanks for saying that. That's one I'm really kind of looking for. I was going to have to try to get somebody to say it if you didn't say it. TJ, did you say anything different in communication?
Respect.
Respect, absolutely. Everybody, so everybody understands, respects everybody's role within the team. Anybody else want to throw something out?
Loyalty.
Loyalty, absolutely. I had a board member call me today. I'll never tell you where, but I bet you'd like to know. They're having some struggles within their board, and this board member said, although we're having our struggles, I would never badmouth our board to anybody because I'm part of that team.
Stick together.
Yeah, so they're
Stick
loyal.
together.
Yeah, stick together, absolutely.
I would say trustworthy.
Absolutely, trustworthy, you bet. So, you know what he's going to, you know what he is. I mean, he comes on the board, he's trustworthy.
Yep.
I don't know that yet. I'm just making an assumption. So, all right. So, I didn't see anybody else come to your defense real fast. So.
She is.
Oh, you, the vice president did. All right. So,
Yes.
I want you to think about those attributes and how that hopefully will become part of this. Now, 7 great board members and a superintendent, we like to call that the grade 8. Now, it can't be the grade 8 unless this team displays those attributes of the team. So please consider that. If you've ever been on that great team, and I sure hope you've had that experience, research actually says if you've ever been on a great team, you spend the rest of your life trying to replicate that experience. You know, and I'm really fortunate. My colleagues at KSB, and I like them all, there's only 32 of us, but the 5 of us within the leadership, my best days when I get to go to Topeka and have a meeting with my group. I don't get to do that very often. I love my team. So, with that said, you're forming a new team, so these are the stages, and I bet you some of you have seen this. Hopefully you have some experience in this, but right now you're forming. Everything's hunky-dory. Everything's pretty darn good. We're pretty excited about our new suit. Pretty excited about new board members. I know it's only been 6 months. Number 2, believe it or not, there's the storming stage. And then number 3 is norming. So what we're going to do tonight is do some norming. So hopefully the storming stage will not be nearly as lengthy as it could be. So we're going to talk about some things that will hopefully norm. And then once you get through 3, 4 is actually performing. So a quick definition of these is, there's kind of some excitement, kind of some anticipation of the new job. Unfortunately, it happens to be this year that you became the new superintendent. You have probably a little bit of pride in being chosen, and I'm not just talking about the superintendent. Those of you that are new board members, you may not ever admit it, but gosh, I'm kind of proud. People actually voted for me to be on this board. Kind of exciting. But at the same time, there's some fear and anxiety. When you're trying to figure out the treasurer thing, there's some anxiety with the board and your district office staff with that. And then right now, everybody's being really nice to each other because you're attempting harmony. And I know that's very difficult for you, TJ. You're in trouble because you're the one sitting to my right and you're real close. So, storming, here's what that may look like. So I want you to think about, you told me about the great teams you were on, but I want you to think about maybe some teams that weren't so great. So storming is when people, you think about your great teams, nobody said the word role, but great teams, everybody knows their role. You know, my role on the high school basketball team was get to play the last minute and a half before halftime, and my coach would say, go foul their best players as hard as you can several times. That was my role. I'm kind of faking it, but I'm trying to come up with something you might figure it out. People, now hopefully not on this team, but you're trying to figure out where the power structure is on certain teams. There's that storming. My ideas, what kind of influence will I have on this team? So everybody's kind of in flux, trying to figure out where their role is and that sort of thing. And then not lastly, but number 3 is norming. This is when you're able to express some criticism openly, because if you don't say what you want, she's not going to ever know it, right? So, but there has to be trust for that to happen, because if you would express some criticism, and she doesn't trust you or like you, obviously that's going to create a conflict as opposed to having a great team. You're accepting of new members now. Well, you know what? We don't really have a choice. We've got 3 new board members, so we're accepting of this. We got a new superintendent. We didn't have a choice. Dr. Summers resigned. We didn't have a choice, but we're starting to accept our new membership. You're establishing ground rules, which is what we're going to be doing this evening. And then we're also going to be forming some goals. So you can see, I guarantee you there'll be some storming. Even though if you're really nice people, there will be some storming. But if we can keep that to a minimum, because we're going to try to do some norming tonight. And then lastly, performing, is everybody understands their strengths, and then believe it or not, everybody's weaknesses. You know, that's really hard for people to, man, I don't want Mr. Crenshaw to know that I'm weak in this area. But when we're forming, or performing when you get to that. You start having some satisfaction with the progress you're making. You feel like you're part of that team. You're able to change with constructive criticism, and you don't see it as that barrier. You can't tell me what we're doing wrong, but if you actually listen, and then you're constructively changing. And then, once again, you're loyal. We heard that term, the attachment to the team. You're loyal. So, with that question, have you ever been part of a team where, you know, I didn't know we had those 4 stages, but you know what, that one team I was on definitely felt at least some of those. Can anybody, you don't have to say what team, or you don't have to say it out loud, but can anybody feel like you kind of have seen this happen at times? All right. But now you know. You may not say it out loud, but you around the board table, we're in storming right now. I remember what Gary taught me. But it's natural. It's absolutely natural. So I want you to think about types of conflicts, and when I look at the phone call, actually it was 2 board members and the superintendent that from the same school district called me separate times, and I had to hear one of the story, not one of them knew the other person called. But here's what's happening. The conflict is based upon these 3 different things, and I can identify each one of these. When the conflict is based upon data, it's because somebody feels like they're not getting the information that's needed. Or misinformation. Now, I would hate that people are giving misinformation, but you know, it does happen. Because you want to sugarcoat things, so you don't tell them the hard truths. Remember that tell them what they need to hear, whether they like it or not. You know, the budget's not where we would like it to be. You know, we had to buy that Aptifund thing, and that put us $8,000 under, you know, you gotta say those things. Some of you, and we see this in politics now, some of us will view certain data, so if you gave me some data, I may think it's the most valuable data in the world, it makes sense to me, he doesn't. You know, it doesn't mean it's not good data, but it's just not important to one person or the other. And then how you interpret that, obviously. Then values, although we all live in central Kansas, Lincoln, Kansas, we all think we all have some rural values, which we do, but there is different ideology around this table. There's different values. It doesn't mean any of you have worse values than anybody else, but there will be value judgments that will be different based upon the decisions that need to be made. And then all of you will use different criteria. Some of you need that data, those numbers, and some of you just need somebody to say that's the right thing to do. You know, that's all you need. And then lastly, relationships. So you think about those teams, you really had some good relationships, but when those relationships start souring because of miscommunication or strong emotions across the table, when you don't have that trust yet, strong emotions are misinterpreted. And it means I don't like you a lot of times, even though that may not be the case. And then what may happen around the board table when somebody within that grade 8, it's no longer the grade 8, is somebody's repeating negative behavior. Now I know it's not you, but I'll use you. If you're the board member that's
Sure.
always, I don't know, you're the one going out, you make a decision, it's 6-1, and you go out, man, I can't believe everybody voted for that. I mean, and everybody knows you're doing that. Repeating that, before long, you're not a very valuable teammate. Or maybe it's him, her, whatever. So these are the 3 different types of conflict that you may see, but when you have that team with great trust, you can overcome these things for sure. So maybe somebody can give me an example without saying it specifically, but have you ever noticed any of these types of conflicts in any sort of either a relationship, a team, that you've either watched or been part of, that you've encountered based upon these 3 pieces of pie? I see a couple of you nodding your head yes, and I'm not going to ask you to say who, because if she would say where, she would, oh man, she worked at the hospital. They must have some issues going on there. So. All right, so you saw this a couple of years ago. It's changed it a little bit, but those attributes of the team, you said some of these the exact same words. Some of them you kind of didn't say the right word, but they fit in here. You think about a great team that went from being either pretty darn good to not being good, or a relationship, a friendship that went south in some manner. It's probably because one of these 5 things ended up not being there for some reason, which means you don't share the same expectations for whatever you're doing anymore. You don't share the same, you know, if I'm going to be on this basketball team, I'm going to score a basket every once in a while. I don't understand my role. I could have tore that basketball team apart. Goal attainment, you got to share goals, and you have to have effective communication. We actually heard that word. There's got to be communication. And then lastly, believe it or not, your personalities have to mesh, but that does not mean you all have to have the same personality. But it does mean that you all have to understand each other's personality. So we're going to start with personality. And on your worksheet, you'll see a little quadrants of 4. And some of you may have done this before, but here's what I want you to quickly do. Go through each one of those quadrants and circle the word that you believe best describes me. Now, listen to the way I said that. Not the way you think people see you. You know what I'm saying? Because you all have to be different. But within your own mind, which of those words in each of those quadrants do you believe best describes you? We're not sharing. I don't expect you to share. I don't want you to share. This is personal. But I'm hoping that one of those quadrants will have more words circled than some of the others. So if you end up having a tie, either try to break it or live with it for what we're doing here. But you don't have to share it with it. I don't want you to share it. So if you need to hide it, please feel free. like you're done, and if you're not, please continue to complete that, but I'm going to keep us moving a little bit. So I want you, I know this is very quick, but I think it will give you a good idea. If you notice, if you end up being on one of the left, one of these two left ones, your personality, you may be a little bit more assertive than the two that are over on the right column. They might have, now, oh gosh, you mean I'm not cooperating? No, that doesn't mean you're not cooperating. But some people might be more assertive than somebody that'd be more willing to allow me to be assertive because you're more willing to be cooperative than I am. That's going to come into play here in a little bit, you'll notice. If you are in one of the top two, your focus is more on people, and if you are one of these bottom two, you might be more task focused. Now, let's get a little bit more specific with that. If you happen to have more words circled in the upper left quadrant, you might be considered an expressive. Now, try not to look at the person around the table that you think fits that category. I dare you not to look at them, so you're doing real good. You're keeping your eyes right on me. But the expressive person, they really like, they kind of like meetings actually, because they like the idea of throwing ideas out. They usually can tell you what they think because they are expressive, all right? If you're in the top right, you might be considered the amiable type. The amiable folks around the board table might be the ones asking this question when a big decision is getting made. So if we adopt this learning initiative, will all of our kids benefit from it, or just the smart kids already? You know what I'm saying? You're really worried about everybody. You also don't like the idea if there is some conflict around the table. You're the one that's immediately going, time for a break? Anybody want a cookie? You know, you're trying to, the amiable person. So that's you. So you can see you're on the cooperative side of that quadrant, and you're more people focused than you are task focused. The bottom left, if it happens to be you, you're considered the driver. Now, I'm looking at those, and my wife says there's some issues with the driver, and I just don't believe it. So, drivers, I already have the idea that we should be doing around the table, so I can't believe the expressives need to talk about it. Right? Because I already know what the answer is. Why spend any time? Let's just go. Let's get it going here. Pretty dang confident, even though maybe we shouldn't be, but we're pretty confident in our skills. Risk taker, competitive, leader. So I take the bat with that too, but I'm very definitely a driver. Like it or not, I'm a driver. The far right, if that's you, you're the analytical type. You're going to be here on time. You're pretty darn concise. If somebody asks you a question, you're going to answer it, and you're going to be done in 3 words. You're also the person around the board table, when he's making a recommendation, you're the person that needs one more bit of data before you can make that decision. So you like numbers, all right? Because that's what's important to you, or that's what makes most sense to you. So I want you to think about that. Knowing what you are, and knowing probably there's other people around the table that are not in the same quadrants as you. I think this question is very obvious, but is it important to have all personality types around the board table? Absolutely. Especially if there's great trust. If there's not trust, hey, talks too much. You know, I just want to get the decision made here as a driver. But you know what? She needs that to make that decision. Would I become more understanding of the other personality types? When I was a superintendent, I always had this one board member that wanted one more piece of information, and I'd be really nice, but it just drove me nuts. I didn't know this. I better have that information before I show up now. That person or those 3 people need that type of information before they can make a decision in their mind. So what if all 7 of you, well, let's say all 8, the grade 8, what if, probably wouldn't be grade 8.
It wouldn't.
No, yeah.
It wouldn't.
But let's just say this, what if all 8 of you were expressives? What would that meeting look like?
A hot mess.
It would get a hot mess, it'd go forever. I mean, you're all nice, you're all talking, you have great ideas, but it would just go forever. Now, we need a couple of those people.
Yes.
Hopefully we don't have all 8. What if all 8 of you are amiable? kind of the same thing. You're afraid to make a decision because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. So you're empathetic. I mean, it's a wonderful trait, but it's probably not going to get a whole lot done if 8 of you are that. Oh my Lord, 8 drivers? What if there were 7 drivers and 1 amiable? That amiable person would be going nuts, wouldn't they? But we're fine because we're used to that. You know, if he's trying to talk, I'm going to talk over him. That's what drivers. And then if we're all analytical, it would drive me nuts. That doesn't mean it's bad. But this test here for you to think about is when you get into that storming stage at some point, you know what? I bet you Gary's a driver. Huh? For him to understand what I'm trying to say, I might have to change my language, and if he's being really smart, if I know I'm a driver, oh my gosh, that's an expressive, I need to let them talk so they can understand what they're trying to say. So this is just not around boards, but it's any team that you're on. You're forming a team right now. So what I'm trying to say is, we all know these are camera lenses. Everybody sees whatever the decision is through a different lens. None of those lenses are worse or better than the other, but you're going to see it different. You might see it through a rose-colored lens, while I see it through a blue-colored lens. But if we understand that, we can come to a better agreement on what the great decision is. 7 board members working together make great decisions, even when it's 4-3. Especially if the 3 understand this was a team thing. It was a team decision. It just happened to not go my way, but it's a great decision because the team made it. That's hard. That's hard. You have to understand that. A 5-2 vote does not mean they don't like you or your recommendation. They had a different value, or they saw it through a different lens of which somebody was not able to explain it well enough to get them to move far enough on that continuum to get where they needed to be. I've used this slide, if you remember, you probably saw it 4 years ago. It looks a little different, but it's the same quote. But boy, I think it just is really relevant right now. It's not our differences that divide us. It's our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. So you all look alike, but you have differences. But if you recognize that she's an expressive and you're an analytical, you can make it work. All right. Communication. So we want to talk about a few little things on communication. So your governance team is the grade 8. It's not just him. So when I get phone calls from the board president, our new superintendent's just not communicating. Boards a lot of times don't think of it as you guys communicating. They only think it's the superintendent, and it may be. But my question is, have you expressed to your new superintendent what you guys need to have? Well, no. Don't they just know they're supposed to tell us a lot? Well, they think they are.
Yeah.
You know. So communication is 2-way. So it's strong, it's ongoing, you have to have respect for diverse opinions, and man, I've had to learn this. But you know what, if I really trust you, you can, I honestly, nowadays with my maturity, if you don't agree with me, I really want to know why. Because I like you, I trust you. Tell me why. Gosh, I never thought of that. I'm not sure I'm changing my mind, but you know what, there is some relevance to what he's telling me. When you have the trust, that's when you get into the performing. Is that you have that 1 or 2 holdouts around the table. Boy, you got the table. Tell us what's wrong here. Wow, never thought of that. Doesn't mean you're going to change your vote. Maybe you will. Maybe you won't. But it's very important. And then with that, it's really important that you folks have some agreed upon operating procedures and agreements around this table. Now, guess what? Even the new board members here have been in Lincoln long enough to know what the sacred cows are in your community. He has no idea. He may go push a sacred cow over, not knowing it's a sacred cow, and all heck breaks loose in the community, right? But you guys know what that sacred cow is. That's why communication is so important.
Some of us might be quiet.
That cow might need to go.
I know, I guess that's what I mean.
Yeah, that cow might need to go.
But you know, when he's got maybe a great idea because he's got new eyes, and he says, hey, this is something I think would be really good for our district, and you might say, you know what, we're 100% behind you, but you do need to be cautious. Maybe we need to hold back a little bit that. Let's give you 6 months, so everybody kind of likes you before you start doing that. Or we tried that 3 years ago, and here's what happened, so be aware of that when you go down that path again. It's really important that you guys are working as a team. You don't want him to fail. So you got to work as a team. So I put this up here before I even know it, but does everybody love coffee around here? You don't?
Yes,
You do?
some of us do.
Okay, so if every type of coffee in the history of the world was out there, and I said, hey, can I get you a cup of coffee? How do you like it? What would it be?
A lot of sugar.
A lot of sugar. Okay, all right, I'm with you. All right. TJ, how about you? You drink
Dark roast.
dark roast. All right. How about you?
And iced coffee.
All right, ice. All right. So I'm going to give you a chance. You like coffee? Can you fake it? How do you like your coffee? How do you like your coffee?
Lots of creamer.
Hey, I'm with you. Cream and sugar. It's got to be a treat. I'm not going to ask you.
An empty cup.
The point I'm trying to say is here is everybody likes communication, but everybody likes it a little different. He has no idea how, TJ, you like your communication. Now, can you also imagine how hard it is for him to communicate 7 different ways to all of you? Now, to a certain extent, I'll say you need to do a good faith effort that everybody understands your message, but you also have to understand how difficult that is. But when you're face to face, all of you need to know that, because he likes his communication a little bit different too, and you don't know what that is yet. And I'm not just talking about, well, I like text, or I like email, or I like face to face. Sometimes it's what type of words. Do I need to get harsh with you for you to understand me, or can we, you know, what it is? So agreed upon processes. Let's go through these a little bit. First of all, there's some agreed upon processes that you folks haven't even thought about. So on receiving information, so are there agreed upon processes on how you've had one board meeting? Is that, so one board, one official regular meeting. So at that point, he walked in there and he was thinking, he's never seen a board meeting, and maybe you came to one, but he had no idea how information was disseminated, right? So that was an agreed upon process. I go to dozens upon dozens of different board meetings, and everybody does it a little bit different. They all do it the same, but it's all a little bit different. So there's agreed upon processes. How do you receive information between meetings? A lot of emails, a lot of text messages from the superintendent, board as a whole back, on an as-needed basis. How do individual board members get information as opposed to the whole board? Now, this is a cautious question here, you know, because there are some coma things that you need to be aware of. But TJ, I'll ask you, and it doesn't mean you have the right answer, so throw something out there. So if you as an individual board meeting member, 3 days before the board meeting, you just needed some information, what would you do?
In what role, as president or not?
Let's just say, yeah, well, let's just say you're not the president. Yeah, because there's 6 of you that are not the president here.
I think we've had a pretty open communication in the past where we approached the
Yeah,
superintendent.
so you could ask the superintendent, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
I pick up the phone and call.
Yeah.
Say, hey.
Right. Now, one thing I would also suggest to this board, but you have to say yes, and he should know this, there should be no secrets around the board table. So TJ, if you had a question 3 days before and your agreed upon process, we just call the superintendent. It might be really good that he sends an email out to hey, I had a board member, you may or may not say who it is, depending on what it is, but had a board member ask this question, my response was this. Because if he's the only one that has the answer, and I know TJ, he'll use that as a power play. You have the secret.
TJ.
TJ, I just can't believe you would do that. No wonder you're not the president anymore. You guys' problems, I know you too well, so, which I can joke, that's not true. But some individuals, and I'm not saying just board members, when you have the secret, it can become power. Now, the board president may need to have the secret a little bit sooner or maybe a little bit longer, but the board should not have secrets. So if that's an agreed upon, hey, we kind of like that idea. If there's a question that maybe Mr. Crenshaw sends out an email and say, hey, this question came up, because guess what? You probably had the same question, and you were gonna wait till the Monday night board meeting, which was gonna add 15 minutes to the meeting.
Or he might think of a question I didn't think to ask.
Absolutely right, absolutely right. And it may have nothing to do with the board meeting stuff, it could just be something else. Hey, I heard something happened at the high school today, is it true? Absolutely, I'm still kind of in the middle of it, but we did have this incident,
When I have time,
and
I'll
here,
think of it.
and then everybody knows at the same time. So, do you like that idea, or? And maybe that's something that's already occurred, I'm not saying it hasn't, but that's something you need to be aware of. What do you folks do when it comes to complaints and concerns? We're going to get into a scenario here. And then information from your admin and staff. So we're going to talk about this. So these are some agreed upon processes, maybe some sacred cows, maybe these questions have not ever been asked. But should the superintendent contact board members when authorities have been called to the school to arrest a student? There's no right or wrong on this, but he would like to know.
I think it's good information to know, especially as a school board, because people are gonna ask, or you hear something, at least you know whether it's information we can divulge or not, at least we can
Absolutely.
say, yes, we're
Yeah,
aware.
I am aware of the situation. Unfortunately, I can't give
It's
you
a
any
student
details.
matter.
Yeah. So, I'm trying, at least a couple of you said you'd like to know on that. I'm
Yeah.
assuming that means probably in Lincoln. Now, in Wichita, probably not.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and not that their kids are any worse or better than yours. They just got so many.
Yeah.
So many. So probably a good idea. And it might just simply be, hey, I'm heading to the high school, there's an incident. I really need to know what's going on yet. As soon as I know, you'll know. That way, if you're at the grocery store, all I know is there is an incident, and I know our superintendent's in the middle handling it, and we'll know later. And it may not be, I don't have time to but Greta, can you send an email out to the board members that something seems to have happened to the high school, and let them know I'll get back with them later? Because hopefully you don't have time to do that. And I hope the board members understand
Yes.
that you want them to get their job done, take care of business. All right, all right. So the superintendent should contact board members when a teacher files a grievance in a violation of the negotiated agreement. Hopefully it's never happened here, but if it would happen, is that something the board members want to know immediately? Could it wait till a Friday note or till the next board meeting? Once again, there's no right or wrong answer on that one.
I don't think we want to know just because it is a small district and probably they've talked to other teachers or that it's out in public and someone.
Or that teacher sees you at the grocery store and says, I can't believe the admin's doing this to me, what do you think? Well, obviously, you don't think about that. You don't think, I guess is what I was trying to say, but I didn't think that would go well. Because that's the admin's job to take care of, and then possibly, according to appeal, it may go to the board, but you really don't want to know too much about it early. You want to know there was a grievance, but after that, we'll let it work. If you have any questions in here, if you need clarification, feel free to ask. Okay. All right. Now, this one's tricky, and I'm kind of telling you right now it's tricky. Board members should contact the superintendent when they have a question for a building principal. How many of you have children in school? So I'll just kind of talk it out with you. If you have children in school, you're always a parent. So if you need to go talk to the principal or a teacher about your child's behavior, more power to you. Unfortunately, you're wearing a hat with a neon sign that says board member. You have that right. You just need to be aware it's awkward, maybe not for you, but it is for the teacher or the principal. But many superintendents, and probably best practice, if you have a question on a building principal about an incident, it's probably best to filter that through, hey, I heard her, I'll find out for you, and then they go to the principal with that question. You're a longtime principal, I was a longtime principal. If you walk in the building, you're the nicest person in the world. Did I pick the wrong person?
That's okay.
Okay. As soon as you walk in the door, it did not take long, there is a board member in the building, board member in the building. Right? I mean, you probably already seen that.
Right.
Yeah.
It would probably, because I don't have children in the district, so somebody would probably wonder what's she doing there.
And if it's the most obvious thing, it's just real innocent, but oh my gosh, I saw him talking to the principal, what the heck's going on with the principal? I bet you that executive session last night was about the principal. And it wasn't, but can you see,
Right.
unfortunately, you guys are in terrible tough situations with board members in small communities. You are. But best practice can be, there's always exceptions, filter, go through him so he can get the information. As a former principal, I think he would like that.
We could bring him with us.
And as a principal, I actually ask board members to go to the city.
Because it puts them in a, you don't think it does. And it shouldn't, but it does. It just really does.
It creates information that I don't know.
Right.
I didn't know there was a question, I didn't know what the answer was, and then I didn't know anything.
And then it raises his hackles a little bit. Oh gosh, what's going on? I wish I didn't know that. And they're making an assumption too. It may be a wrong assumption, but yeah, I had 2 board members come in and close my door as a principal and say, we need to ask you some questions about our superintendent. No, I don't want to. Yeah, that's really awkward. All right. Now, board members, should you contact the SUP if you get a phone call from a constituent?
Depends what about.
Okay. Yeah, if it's about the superintendent, you probably want to then call the board president and say, hey, I got this. But if it's about, I heard this happened at the high school, probably they need.
If it's something irrelevant or petty, then, but if it's something serious, yeah, I think you should be told right away, what's.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Everybody feel comfortable with that? Especially he's so new, he doesn't know all the rumors in town that you do or the constituents know. Have I been in this business way too long to act like I know everything? I don't know everything, but I know all. All right, so I put this together actually for a 2A school district, not Lincoln. We used to call it the chain of command, but that upsets people. Our chain of command, I'm not in the military, you're my board member, I want to talk to you. Lines of communication. So look where the board is. They're on the far right on every one of those. You're going to get phone calls. All of you will, unfortunately you will. And it's about the coach. We have a lines of communication. We're doing our best to follow the lines of communication. Have you talked to the coach yet? Yes, I have. Oh, great. Have you talked to the athletic director? If you don't have an athletic, have you talked to the principal? No. Well, I would encourage you to talk to the principal. Now, that doesn't mean you don't call the superintendent. They're probably calling the principal and going, hey, I had a board member have a phone call. He or she did a great job. They're probably going to be calling the principal here before long, so be ready on that regard. But it's a lot easier to say, now I'm not saying you need to do this, but a couple of districts have actually made this board policy. So it's kind of like me when I was in high school. Hey, Gary, going to beer party? Well, I'd like to, but I'm out for football, so I can't. I'd like to help you, but we have this darn lines of communication. So if you talk to the teacher, kind of give you an out.
We do have that also.
You do have that, great. All right, but it wasn't your district I put it together for. It was for a district where a board member was going into classrooms with a yellow notepad and evaluating the teachers. True. Greta, is that wrong?
Wow.
Yeah, no. You'd be amazed. All right, so should you call the superintendent when a rumor pops up on social media about your school district?
It would depend on how severe the rumor was.
Yeah, you always have to make some judgment.
Yes. If
But
it's
most
petty
likely
and
he's not
silly, then
connected
no.
yet to some people and doesn't know about it. And if there's a rumor about a teacher or a kid that you're trying to protect,
Yeah.
you always have to make a judgment. But I would think default
Yes.
is you would go there unless there's rational reasons for not. Are you a social media person? Which means he's not. You just didn't want to say that.
More than you probably would think.
Okay, all right, very good.
You kind of have to an extent.
So let's talk about this. So as a board, do you have a process on establishing the monthly agenda. So I'm not going to ask the board president or the former board president because they've gone through that process. But if anybody else would be willing, do you know how the monthly agenda is established or formed in Lincoln 298?
The president, vice president, and the superintendent get together.
Okay.
And set the agenda. Individuals who wish to address the board or come with discussion items or informational items, they contact the district. There's a form they fill out, which then.
Okay, so you have
We
a
have a
process
process, we have
for
a process.
patrons. So,
Yep.
Greta, I'm assuming you kind of put a template together, you probably show it to the superintendent, and he or she will say, I don't know any better, that looks awesome. And then, does the board president then meet at some point with them, or at least by phone, to double? Okay, well, okay, outstanding. So that's the week before the board meeting, correct, when you folks meet?
There's a deadline for patrons to submit a request to be on.
Good, that kind of protects you
Yes.
folks from surprises also. Okay, you
It
guys
helps
have a
them to
great,
be organized.
you have a great process, so congratulations for doing it that way. But what if the board agenda is still being in the process of being formed? And I know you're new, so this is why we're asking this question, because if she doesn't know, you need to know. If she would like to add something onto the agenda, do you know the process that you would use to do that? At least in Lincoln?
That hasn't been completely clear. I feel.
Okay, yeah, that's why we have this on here, because he also would kind of like to know. So anybody else want to answer that, or you all kind of want to know?
I've kind of put it together from different
Right.
things here and there, but.
Well, whether the board president likes to hear this or not, you're the gatekeeper. You really get to say yay or nay to what's on the agenda. Now, I would like to think in most cases you would put something on the agenda, but there may be some things that the new board members don't know that you've already had blood, sweat, and tears on. You really don't want to have to bring it up anymore. You know, there are rationale.
Or the topic might be something that's more personnel or executive session, and they
Absolutely.
might say, hey, that's great, but we can discuss this here.
Or we took care of this 6 months ago. I mean, for you, we've got a plan and work. So, oh, okay. But so if you'd like to get something on board, do you call the board president or the superintendent or the clerk?
I don't know.
Okay. If you call the superintendent or the board clerk, they're probably going to say, well, I'm going to have to double check with the board president to make sure that's okay. And then that week before, hey, she wanted to put this on. This is a request by board member Smith. Is that okay? Greta, so far is kind of what happens here?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
exactly what happens. I've got a file, I drop everything in that file, and then when they have their agenda meeting, it's there,
Good.
and then they decide what goes on.
Good. Well, you guys have an agreed upon process, so now you have a pretty good idea of what's going on, so that's wonderful. All right. So with that said, I want to talk about the agenda. So are your board meetings too short, too long, just right?
Depends on the month.
Too long?
I think too long.
Okay. I'm not going to ask how long, because I don't know how long, but
Depending on the month.
It depends on the month, and some months we have a lot more stuff that we have to do. And, yeah.
okay. Well, I go over this, I want to go over this with you real quick, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time, but I do a whole hour session just on prioritizing agendas. There's 4 different quadrants. There's items on the agenda that might be considered urgent and important. There might be items on the agenda that are not urgent, yet they're important. There are items that are considered urgent, not important. Now, I want you to look at these qualifying statements under each one of these. And then lastly, not urgent or not important, without any explanation from me, those quadrants. Which quadrant would you guess, because I've not given you, that you think a high percentage of your board agenda items should be in which one of those quadrants? And you're probably going to get it wrong, which is fine, because it's kind of the point I'm trying to make here. If you had 10 agenda items, you would like to think 8 of them, preferably all 10 of them, are going to be in one of those 4 quadrants.
You think you're gonna get it wrong? So it's a trick
Probably
question.
not. You guys are smarter than I
As he
think.
says, that's a trick question.
It is kind of a trick question, but it's,
Okay, number 1.
I was gonna say 2.
I'm going to say 2. Yeah. Now, and the reason because it's urgent and important, gosh, we got to do it.
Then we should have been doing it sooner.
Absolutely. When you're in quadrant 2, you're being proactive. So if you don't do things in quadrant 2, talk about things that are important, and they're things that we don't have to get done next month. We got 6 months to do it. Nothing ever becomes urgent because you're always in quadrant 2.
Give them time to make.
You know, the best example of this would be well, if you happen to be in redesign or school improvement process, you know, that takes a long time. Well, if there's a deadline, you don't wait till the month before that. Oh my gosh, we got to get this approved right now. Well, it's urgent. But if you have been talking about it for however long, urgent is the quadrant of necessity. We absolutely have to do this tonight. Well, you got to hire your personnel. You know, you don't want to wait a month to hire a new English teacher when you got them on the books. So it is important, but it's urgent. It's not urgent and important is the quadrant of quality. That's where you're spending most of your time. This 3 is the quadrant of deception. These are the things when you're working in your office or at home that you think, when somebody goes, well, how's it been? Oh, busy, 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 busy. Well, that's because it's urgent and not important, but you're letting the interruptions of your work or the board work, reports that you're hearing from your principals, maybe. I'm just, you know what I'm saying. It seems like it's urgent, so we probably better do it, but it's the quadrant of deception. It makes you think you're busy, so it seems important, even though it's not. And then lastly, these are just things where honestly, you're not going to have this on your agenda. But if you're going to do an executive session to talk about some of these things, which isn't not legal, by the way, you're wasting time. So you might, if you think your meeting, I heard a couple of you say you think they're too long, you might look through there to say, well, we got stuff in quadrant 3 in there that shouldn't be. Now the hard part about this, 4 of you may think this stuff is here, you know, until you really agree on what those quadrants actually, the definition of each of those, it'll be hard to do. Do you have I asked this question, consent agenda? You know what that is, consent agenda? You do not, okay. A consent agenda is what we would explain as routine and mundane matters. So there could be 20 things on the consent agenda and they can all be approved with one motion. Now, the board has to decide if they're routine and mundane. I mean, that's the board's decision. But a lot of times paying the bills, rather than going through every check, you know, and if you're really worried about that, you assign somebody to come up on Fridays and you go through all of them and you just do it, hey, they all look good, you know, there's no questions. Even personnel, honestly, it's what this board believes to be routine and mundane. Because the board down the road may not think that agenda item is routine. Even the personnel report to hire the English teacher and the music teacher can't be on the consent agenda. So these 15 items can all be in one, and any board member has the privilege to pull something off. So when you get to the consent agenda, TJ may say, I'd like to pull the personnel report, and if the board president deems that okay, and if you see there's some tension there, you might say, well, I don't really think it's necessary, but what's the board's wishes? 6-1, let's take it off. And the board president would say, well, let's put the consent agenda personnel item 5C. And then when you get to it, you talk about whatever it was that needed to be pulled off. Theoretically on the consent agenda, if he wanted to pull it off, you can't talk about it right there, theoretically. I've seen boards go, because it's only a 10-second question, you know, they answer it, but theoretically it's supposed to be pulled and talked about separately. So it's just something to consider. That doesn't mean the board wishes to do that, but if you think your board meetings are too long, maybe it's part of that. Also put your really important stuff, this stuff at the beginning, you know, when you're fresh, because that's the important stuff that you're really thinking. Hello? Good evening. So things to consider, you know, I would never make a judgment on board meetings are too long, but it's when the board decides they're too long or too short, or we're not getting the information that needs to come from the board. And the board president doesn't like to hear this, but she makes the meeting flow or not flow. Yeah. All right. So So we pretty much have talked about these items here. So here's the question I really need to ask you. This is an important question. If I asked you what the core work was in the district, all of you would say something about student achievement, student success, student learning. I would like to think. So do you have a process in your board where you folks hear about the core work of your school district?
Writing notes.
Okay, writing notes.
The superintendent's report during the meeting.
Okay, superintendent's report. All right. Good. So you have that, because sometimes I ask that question and nobody knows how your kids are doing, you know, and that's kind of scary. So, great. All right. This is why we talked about the agreed upon processes, when should you call the superintendent or should the superintendent call you folks? Because strong communication ensures that board members and superintendents are never caught off guard, put on the defensive, or embarrassed because they're not in the know on big issues. And sometimes smaller issues, because in Lincoln, in the grocery store, you might hear something in the checkout line that you didn't know about. It may not be a big issue, but it is a big issue to that person. And you're kind of embarrassed because you didn't know about it. So the hard part is, how much does he send you, you know, and how much does he know to send to you? That's hard. So there'll be some storming going on at that point, trying to figure that equilibrium. When somebody, a new superintendent, like, why do I send everything until they tell you to quit sending you everything? Because you don't have to read everything, actually. You know, you'll start on. In fact, I didn't even see Friday notes. If I put it in red, or if it's bolded, this is the stuff. If you're only going to read half of my stuff, here's what I really want you to read. This is really the core work of the district, or something you might hear about at the grocery store. So it's kind of set up in sections sometimes. Role. Most of you have seen this. You know this is the watchtower. Remember, you got folks are in the watchtower. You're lucky. You don't have to be the firefighters. You don't have to get your hands dirty. That's his job. He's the firefighter out on the ground. So when you see that issue, we've already talked about communication. Hey, I see this. You're in the watchtower. You've heard this. You've seen it. You tell him. He takes care of it. Or he comes back to you and say, it really wasn't a problem. You know, after my research. That way you know what's going on. So you have seen this. Some of you new board members may or may not have seen this, but I want to go through this quickly. And this is really a lot for Mr. Crenshaw, because a lot of board members think, well, gosh, they're just telling us. This is also for superintendent's role, not just board members' role. So everything above that perforated line is the board's authority. Everything below it is the superintendent's authority. That line is perforated to denote there has to be communication between both parties. You share the same goals, but you have different roles in how you achieve those. So without communication, the line gets blurred. So board, you've got to set the vision for the school district. So we're going to have some short-term goals tonight. So if you want to say that's your vision for the district, you absolutely could. But you're going to be setting some goals. So in a simple sense, we'll say you're establishing some vision tonight. You may or may not make that formal, but that's going to end up being policy, because you're going to mandate him to start working on those, right? So it's basically board policy to get it done. The next click is now the superintendent's work. He's got to develop the plans to achieve your goals. So board, you're the what. What do you want to do? Well, whatever the goals are, that's the what. And then now he gets to figure out how, absolutely, to achieve those. But while you're developing those plans, you're talking to the board. Hey, I've got teacher groups, I got a couple parents, we've got administrators, here's where we're going right now. Does that sound pretty good? Hey, yeah, you're on the right track, keep her going. Then once the plans have been approved, then it's the superintendent's responsibility to get those plans implemented, which is the most simple part, would be getting them implemented into the classroom, probably. The next two clicks are similar yet different. The first click is still superintendent. He needs to monitor the progress of the goals for you. That's, once again, the core work. If he's not, and I say it doesn't have to be him, all this stuff can be delegated, but it's your responsibility. It could be a principal telling you about what's going on in the classroom, lead teacher, could be kids, but you're monitoring the progress. And then board, it's ultimately your responsibility to evaluate the results of those plans. Now, he's pretty astute. I hope that you will say to the board before any one of them feel the need, I don't think our plans are working the way I'd like. I'd like to have permission to tweak the plans, board, what do you think? And about 7 of you are going, thank goodness he said that, because I sure didn't want to have to be the first one to say it, but it is your privilege. Now, if one of you say that, it doesn't mean it's right. It's when the whole board feels, and obviously you can talk them into it. That's what board work is. But keep the communication lines open. So, board, you always get to decide, and the superintendent makes recommendations and gives you options. This is when you allow the superintendent to do some of your work. So you see how that line is now moved up into your responsibility? The most common thing that I see, and ends up not sounding terrible until after a long time it starts to fester. Mr. or Mrs. Superintendent, you've been here a long time. Tell us what our goals should be. That's your responsibility, right? Now, it's not that you're not working with them. Give us some recommendations. What are some things we really need to work on? Let's talk about this, or get a group to collaborate. And at the board, the most common thing you see here is when board members want to be part of developing the plans. Getting into the how rather than the what. He gets in trouble when he tries to do the what as opposed to the how. And that's a fine line. It's kind of tough. So board, you get to decide what. The soup decides how. You request information, he provides it to you. You get to deliberate and make a decision. He provides options and makes recommendations to you. You adopt policy, he implements it. You contract with professionals. So those of you that are new, and since you kind of weren't, it's kind of a weird school year this year, the principal may hire an English teacher, but it is not official until you contract with him at a board meeting. They recommend that English teacher to you, you contract with. At some point, you folks probably 5 to 8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, approved the evaluation criteria of your teachers and your principals. Those of you on the board would remember that. You supervise and evaluate, or he supervises and evaluates. It doesn't mean he's evaluating everybody in the district, but he is making sure that it's getting done. And being a principal, he knows the timelines and all that. Now, I want you to be aware that he needs to be evaluated twice this year, by the 60th day of each semester. So that's typically by the 3rd or 4th week of October. And if you have a spring break, and if it's normally the 3rd week of March, it's right in that time period for the 2nd semester. Okay. Just like it would be for teachers. It doesn't say teachers, it says licensed personnel, your licensed personnel. So, superintendent, this is a statute that basically says what we just said, is that you have charge and control of the public schools, but under the conditions of the board policies, processes that they have enacted at some point. So you're like the bank president, you're running the bank. You're governing the bank. Now, goals, so we're going to get into some short-term goals here. I want you to think about this, and we're not going to write anything down unless you'd like to on your note page, but I want you to contemplate this question. What does a student need to be able to do to succeed in life after leaving USD 298? You don't have to answer that out loud, I'm not expecting you to, but I want you to think about that. If you're able to answer that question, can you answer this question? Where do we intentionally develop those qualities within our system? So if I'll just do a fictitious answer on the top, after the system, they need to be able to communicate well with 4 or 5 different methods of effective communication, whatever that might be. So where in your system do you intentionally design that kids learn those communication skills? Okay, it's a question I want you to contemplate, because it could be working to goals somehow. you folks govern students. Now, your principals and the superintendent the day-to-day, but you're doing the policies to make sure the students are achieving. Your job is to make sure the district is run well, not to run the district. So that's kind of different. The ed program, the physical plant, and personnel, and the fifth one is the glue between all of these, your communication and culture within your district. And I've already heard you say communication is really important to you. And without communication, these could be tied. Without great communication, you're not going to have good culture. And you could say without a culture of the district, there's not going to be effective communication. So you can see how they're definitely tied together. So in groups of, Madam President, I'm going to put the board in two groups. Is there a preference? You want to tell me which board members cannot work with each board member right now, please? Would it be okay with just the four of you working in a group and the three over here? Or?
That works.
All right, so if you notice, I've got some sticky notes in front of you. Within your group, I want you to come to consensus on 2 or 3 changes that you feel your district needs to make in the next couple of years. Now, I'm probably going to put my foot in my mouth, but this is not where you say, I'm pretty sure we're going to have to get rid of the football coach. That's, we're not looking for that. Okay? Did I not make that mistake before? So, but I hope you see, what are some of the 2 to 3 changes that you as a group can agree on? You're going to put 1 change per sticky note. So if you have 2, I'll have 2 sticky notes or maybe 3 sticky notes. So have a little conversation and I'll kind of monitor when it looks like that's done.
I can't spell.
How's harvest this year?
Better than expected.
Good for you.
So I could
Okay. Are you already done?
I'm a foreigner.
Yes.
I can spell it, it's
About a week.
I was just looking to read it. Fair, check that out.
Okay.
Yeah,
Did you get it?
That
Okay.
would be one of my things I can't spell.
Good conversation.
I want to say, I'd like to say lessons, but I think we need to evaluate all.
I was talking to David till I'm from Gary, and tell him I was hanging out in the background. That's when I didn't know you didn't have your camera on, but I came up behind you, so they could see me there. That's in front. And I know there's somebody in the wonderful people.
Those types of
As a new superintendent, people are going to come to you and have something settled, but they don't think something settled. Now you're the new one. And that's tough, because you want to show them what they live on the new government handle and everything's all right. They're going to make it worse. What they tell you is true. They don't really tell you that. They don't tell you any lie. They don't tell you all the truth. But that's where you go, man.
This is your plan and goal. So it's like, yes, 5-year plan, yeah.
Let's just talk about school. What teacher because
There's going to be some.
somebody so what you need to do, if it's executive session material, so like previous young lady out there on the playground in Fernando's, you might say you had a 3rd grader, sure, everything's fine, but you're like, that's what it is. You wouldn't say that out. You wouldn't say the answer. Okay, session.
So back to that whole teacher contract, maybe
because it started September 9, and we don't know yet 1,160 hours. But I would like to be proactive in this regard, so I think we need to talk about the calendar just in case.
This one, we have to have another one.
We gotta go 1,116 hours, I call it in August 15th. I'd like to get CARES money, smart money to pay for these.
At least two.
I never said.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's,
Call each one of them individually.
so, it's not just, so like, what are some of the
Funding,
When you see your private, the CC, I get that. If they accidentally reply, it only goes back to you, not in that.
yeah, and that's hard,
We could,
we
but-
want to live like we are.
That I could. If you do it individually, it needs to be in the DCC.
Yes.
If you do it for a group,
That somebody may say.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
they do it for the
Yes.
accident, or they don't think.
Because we're not just, I'm not supposed to.
because your financial
We can follow them, right, it was something we used to be back. You're gonna know about it. I'll let you know. Sometimes I don't want the board to know that. Probably not what she hears. You say, you know, did you request? Just so I would. I got rid of it though. You guys have yours? Okay, all right. How you folks doing? I'm not gonna be the quota person. They'll probably be mad. I know how your team is. This group has more than 2 or 3, so I want you to know if you want to do more, it's
We have
okay.
3, and we're good with that.
You feel like you're
Yeah.
done then? All right, so here's what's gonna happen.
We generalized, kind of both of them together.
They did the umbrella approach. All right, so
There's more guys over there, that's why.
So if somebody over here would read your changes that you foresee or think need to happen, and then if this group has any questions, then I'm gonna put your 5 up on this board.
Because it's
So-
my scribbled writing, I guess I'll read it.
Okay, you'll read that. All right, so if you will let your teammates know what this group wrote down.
Okay, and the liberal conference, like, cut enough things out that in the future we can stay within our budget.
Okay, so reduction of some services or something.
That was
Okay.
kind of what I wanted.
Okay, so think about that.
Yeah.
Either, if you think it's the exact same thing, then you don't have to read it, but it's up to you to decide if you think
Because
it's
we
the same or not.
said, adapting activities and extracurricular activities that are supported within our funding.
Let's keep that one just because it's written a little different, but it is the same
Same thing.
umbrella, so, all right.
Curriculum updates.
Okay, great, excellent, okay. Good, I'd like to hear that.
Okay, 5-year plan and 10-year plan for district improvements.
Okay. Or like capital outlay improvements, they have,
Yes.
okay, all right. So spend things that may require money.
Yes.
Okay.
I guess kind of the curriculum, you know, it's like you might need math needs updated this year,
Sure.
and then in 2 years, we need to do English, and kind of
Like
keep that on the roll.
Yes.
So not as serious capital outlay, but
Yeah, not just that,
just,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Gotcha.
An ABC plan.
yes. Improved test scores,
Okay.
because we did things were kind of low in some things as far as test scores. And this one I struggled, they had lots to say, and I just had to try to pare it down. I put be more timely and efficient when possible on decisions.
Okay, so I want to make sure that Mr. Crenshaw, he doesn't have to know background, but do you have an understanding of what that means?
I would have to say no.
Okay, and maybe it's not a good place, but at some point, somebody needs to tell him what that means.
Yeah, so they had a lot to say, I just tried to make it I couldn't write all of that.
Okay,
For the most part, when things need to be decided a month or two from now, let's get the ball rolling in time.
Instead of the year.
That we're
Quadrant
So then we're not
chasing
in quadrant
fires.
one, we're in
there you
quadrant
go.
two.
You're trying to be in quadrant 2-1, and you missed out on the best part of this, I'm telling you right now, it goes downhill.
I know. Urgent importance, urgent, not important.
Oh, you saw that?
Important, urgent,
Yeah, you got
not
it.
important.
You bet. Actually, I got a hand that I forgot to give to you, but, all right, so, do you guys have any questions for them on
No, those
what
were
they're
good, those were good.
Okay.
And those were some of the things that we talked about too. We had curriculum, and then we talked about adapting our activities and like extracurricular things that fell within our budget.
So that would at least be similar to the budget
Yes,
when they
and then we had like functional efficiency. Like, we think that there are probably ways in which some of the things that we're doing could be done more efficiently.
Our transportation.
Like transportation,
Oh, okay.
food services, different
Sure.
things like that, that we should be looking at all those areas in ways in which we can do things more efficiently that would probably be cost saving.
Yeah.
I kind of see that software as maybe a way that maybe making some of those changes might help us be more efficient in what we're doing, which might save money.
Excellent, appreciate that.
So,
So, do you folks have any questions for this group on their, what they wrote? You know, it's kind of interesting because you were all so similar. To me, that makes me feel halfway decent that you're thinking.
Halfway
So-
united.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes on these next 2 questions. So the next questions are, the next question, same drill,
And fire quick.
but 1 or 2. What's some critical challenges that you see coming in the next 12 to 18 months? Now, I know COVID is big. You feel like you have to write that down, but whether you write it down or not, it's going to be something you have to deal with. So 1 or 2 critical challenges that you think will be coming your way in the next 12 to 18 months.
I think that our budget has money. Money is going to be, so we're going to have less of it, and we're going to need to spend more of it. You know, I also see, the other concern that I have is, that I would say that we're going to have to, is that we're dealing with the misconception that I only school is did, and I have that concern that they didn't see more of these people. Yeah. I hope not, I hope we're going to see the reality.
Ten, 12 to 18 resolution.
And all of this information is being compiled, all put together from the city for you.
Well, yeah, probably. A decreased numbers is, I guess I would say, one of the things that concern me is that we might see our activity enrollment decrease, which in turn will lower our budget. And the other thing we have to do
Just pie charts and graphs. Right, did you read the attachment for our summary?
But I think that.
We still need to review on a Monday night.
The way that we ran our budget.
So they don't have, they've already looked
And
at it.
we had, that was a staff.
Respondents.
And that one has.
So I do have on the contact, no name, but I have 7 people I contacted to find out how we best serve them.
Because they may not understand that you're gonna do all that, or you're gonna provide that.
Maybe not.
Positions are gonna be harder to fill.
This group has a hard time counting.
What?
1 to 2.
Well, no, these are from, these
Oh,
are
those
from,
are
hush. Hush. Let's just, no, I will do that, because I don't want them to leave, especially when they're in.
Try and make water.
guys have, yeah, this is really, there's an action on that, breakout section on that. Several times.
Yeah, yes, I can help you right now.
Of course you are. Right. But if you would have known about it a year ago, and a year from now, you would have been working on that. You're going to have these, if you keep it to a minimum. What if you have more than COVID? What if you have three things over here? Thank goodness you only have one, because you were here. Okay. How you guys doing? Think you have one?
We're good.
Comfortable with what you got? All right, so let's start with this group over here. So if somebody from this group would share with your colleagues the one or two that you had, and then we'll let them report. All right, so whoever it is.
Yeah, sure, I guess that's gonna be me. Okay, we, obviously budget cuts, money is gonna be a huge factor. Decreased enrollment.
Okay, reduce the enrollment.
Copycats.
Huh?
Copycats.
Well, that was a
We're on the
concern.
same board.
Transportation, we see the fact that our transportation contract is coming up, we're gonna have to make some critical
Okay, so
decisions
it's
with
not
that.
routes as much as the whole system.
The system,
Okay.
and then, like, teacher retirement, which might sound weird, but like a concern that we have is that those harder to fill positions will be the ones that will retire. And we're having more of a struggle to find science teachers and math teachers, and how are we gonna fill those positions, you know?
Or we'll have to make the hard decision not to fill it.
How do you do
Yeah,
that?
and how do you do that?
So questions from this group on those four?
We just did two this time.
So you followed the directions,
We followed
very nice.
the directions. Yes. And then we just put in all the same. Yeah, but we just wrote down two this time.
Okay, and your two are?
We did the enrollment declining, we said there's a lot of homeschool kids, so that would be part of it.
Try to get them here an hour.
And just making cuts where we can in general.
So do you think those were, pretty much the same?
I think they're the same.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you, all right. So the next one to go, the last question, is barriers. List 2 or 3 potential barriers that could impact your district's ability to be successful in the next 12 to 18 months. Boy, I'm being a really Debbie Downer here with these
You
questions.
only hide so many lottery tickets.
That's potential.
So 2 to 3, or once again, if you have more or less, obviously it's fine.
In a sense, we have a lot of people that are unwilling to accept change.
I sent you, you saw I sent you and Joe's list of my colleagues that do those meetings. One of
What
them,
is this?
wow, pretty detailed.
You can't cut
I mean,
You can't do this, we must divide this first.
but they don't realize that they're asking us to keep things that our kids don't want. You know, like, I'm sorry, I don't know baseball. You know how many Lincoln High School kids signed up to play baseball? 5. Why? 5. Why? 5 kids. But we don't want to miss out. But, and we're all like that, there are things that we feel are so bad to us, but are those things what's important to the kids? Is that what driving kids to come to our district is not just a, yeah. Yeah, all of our unwillingness to change sometimes, sometimes all of us are unwilling to change, and we feel like what
It's
we
not
want
says
is the
that, but it
only
kind of
way.
means the same thing.
Where teachers will in teachers will
What was your first statement? Just the first one before you, what did you say first?
Change of culture takes time.
It does.
Each year, they always say, you're going to notice how we're fighting.
So do you folks
That's right.
have,
That's true.
I always remember that.
I remember, I think it's pretty good about it, one time, and that's supposed to be what we're supposed to remember, that that's what we're here for. And we all forget that sometimes. We all do. And sometimes we're all just trying to hang on a little more.
That's why I got to suggest to change.
you're done?
I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, so let's report out. I'm gonna ask this group over here to report out. This group's gonna listen, right? All right. So, That was a teacher trying to hint, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, this group's gonna report. All right.
Local business opportunities dwindling.
Okay, so, tax base?
Yeah.
People base,
Local health facilities possibly closing.
Ah.
Yeah.
student base.
Hospital or just a little?
In general,
It's a worry, it's a
Yes, it's a
worry.
worry. And people in the community's ability to change or adjust to change.
Yeah. The one that we kind of snickered at kind of matches that one. Yeah. All right, so do you guys have any questions based
No.
on?
Those were similar to ours.
Okay.
We wrote down the sacred cows, there were things, some of those are barriers.
Which is the ability to change.
And that's all of us, that's all of us. And then we talked about, change of culture takes time. And how all of us, you know, even us need to be willing to accept change.
Thank you for that. All right, so we're still gonna work in groups, so don't sit down, we're still working in groups.
Okay.
Of course, if you want them to stand, we can go sit. That's not gonna work. All right, so here's what's gonna happen. Within your group, I want you to think about either, you can call it a goal, we're not gonna write it in goal form now, or some sort of objective. But within your group, write down 3 to 5 objectives that you would like to see this district, which will be led by Mr. Crenshaw. Some objectives or goals that you would like to be, start working on. So what you just did might help you identify, may not, but it could be something to base some decisions on. So within your group, once again, 3 to 5 either goals, objectives, and then we'll try to prioritize those a little bit.
Yeah. That is gonna drive everything. You know, we can't, if we don't concentrate on the budget and what we're spending and where we're spending, if we can't buy something, we can't keep it.
Like whatever you have. And just keep them to yourself. And we're gonna report it, just not quite yet. Yeah, I've got a marker, I'll give you a marker.
Obviously, we want to be able to now, I don't know about all those things that we want, you know, curriculum, and all those things, but that idea of plan, to prioritize, you know, what is needed first, you know, a plan, a rotation plan. And then we talked about, like, I mean, like, you know, like, the track and everything else. I think we need to have some kind of a long-term plan. As a how we're gonna, you know, increase the amount of stuff and students to get, you know, from the track to the parking lot to, windows, you know, all those increase.
I've always taken a picture of the schoolhouse before you.
That even the basic, I think that one of our goals should be that we need to be able to your test scores. For our kids on, and how to grow that, and see where.
I've only got 12 we used to do in a month and a half.
Because, we don't.
You're number
We don't
3.
talk about test scores that much. The form gets, the report gets handed out to us.
You guys are already down, be aware.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 to 5. Oh, throw that one away.
Well, when I picked it up, it's,
Well, if it's me, I put it back in my hand thing, and then I so that would get on my, oh, that's the one we're gonna choose.
Yes. That should be a part of that.
trash can back there?
And then it's important, really, so
that way, like, and just,
Because they would end up being long.
Yes.
I'm sure he's
Honestly,
gonna prioritize.
these things that we're talking about,
You got it. You've been around KASB enough, haven't you?
That's what he talks about.
I added in community to the website.
one of the things that like you talked about, the Sechrist chapter, and changing the culture. I think that's something that we should do, is how to communicate better amongst ourselves and with the community, so that we're more transparent, and so that there's more involvement, and so that people are more willing to accept change, and they embrace it a little bit more. I think it's really good talking about all of these things, and I hope to see that we do something for someone in 18 years. But we actually, if we want to change, if we want
I'm
to
the guy
change
who's
the
at Augusta,
culture,
and I've
we
worked
have
for
to
KASB
make
8
steps
years.
towards it.
Every July, for
Yeah.
8 years, I've gone and
And I think-
reviewed their goals, maybe established. I'm not saying you need me to do that. Augusta has an opinion.
It is.
I can already keep on you guys, the big guy.
Doug Nickel?
Yes, he has come, is that what he did with us?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
So annual,
When we
Yes.
started this year, did it change
No,
anything?
no.
Right.
Right, you're right.
Oh,
Well, and
he's always.
You have your board members come on, go on, but as the year goes on,
So are you
so many
two
things
volunteers in
develop
this
and
meeting?
they're not priority anymore. So I
Yeah.
just think that
You're from,
this is really good because it has
Yes,
us
ma'am.
talking. No, I don't think you're right. We wouldn't necessarily have an opportunity to be in February.
Yeah.
Born and raised alumni.
my board clerk of mine was from Stonington.
I moved here and went to school the last 4th grade year.
Well, one of the people that you went to was superintendent.
Yes, yes, I know.
Yeah. From,
I
I
got the involved.
think his dad was in the Air Base.
Yes, Rock, the naval base.
Rock.
Yeah, and it would be naval. Subs.
You guys got yours?
We do.
And you guys need more time? Your group? Yeah?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so, go ahead and report, however many you have, if you would, tell your colleagues what you have written down, please.
3 to 5 cupcakes every meeting.
That's easily solved, isn't it?
Cookies were pretty good. Chocolate, I had chocolate.
No chocolate.
Okay, we put, increase morale with staff and students, increase parent and community involvement.
Excellent, you bet.
Budget, and an annual budget, first year, second year, third year, get an actual budget and stick with it.
Well, with the plan, the plan every year, what we
Yeah, so there'll
did,
be
so it kind of goes back to our previous.
Yeah, one of your,
5-year plan or whatever, yeah.
Oh, not just the budget, the
Yeah.
No,
They want to play
the
right.
priority plans for the
Yes,
budget.
yes, yes. Yeah.
Good way for
We put increase community awareness of the school and what's going on there, which we've already heard good things from the community about the things that Mr. Crenshaw's doing and putting out there. And annually review and assess our goals and expectations.
That's important. That's important. Okay, thank you very much. Now, does this group have any questions from this group on yours? All right, let's hear yours.
The budget, we put budget analysis, analyze ways in which we could be more efficient in our budget, like you guys said, a plan, how to afford the things that we
And along with that, go with the accounting, get the accounting squared away so that
can be
that
more
can be
efficient.
analyzed.
Help develop a curriculum plan, like prioritizing, based on like test scores, and teacher need, I can't.
Try to evaluate whether our low test scores are curriculums or teachers or the actual students.
Combination of.
Yeah,
Yes,
what's
what-
causing that and how to,
What's the easiest?
and age of the curriculum, that's what that said. I thought, this is age and teacher, you didn't say
That's in
teacher age,
Swedish.
or that better not.
So age of the curriculum?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And then we talked about transportation and the need to kind of analyze and address, where we are and where we would want to go in terms of transportation. And then we talked about helping to change the culture. That probably goes along with the morale of the staff and the community and, helping to change how we all feel.
But we also understand that it'll probably take most of a year to understand.
Understand our culture before you can help us to improve our
Please
culture.
put Craigslist.
Oh, you golf?
Guns and rifles too.
Yeah. I'm missing league golf for this.
Okay, so, thank you for that hard work. So, the ones that I thought were fairly similar, I put together. So if you're gonna put a dot by one of these, you're really kind of voting for both. You're not voting for one or the other. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've given you 3 dots. What I'd like you to do is to come up and put a dot by the one. If you're the only board member, TJ, which 3 would you hope that we would work on this month? So I'd like to see what the distribution of dots. There might be one that ends up with 7 different dots. That's going to be pretty dang important. We may get one that has none. So just want to see where we're at. So if you come on up with your 3 dots and put your dots up there.
And you're saying, work on this month?
12 to 18 months.
12 to 18 months.
Yeah. Or at least great progress towards, that's some of these are tough. He's trying to make it tough.
Yes. I need more dots.
No, you don't. Are you the one I'm gonna have to stand by that you don't steal or move dots?
Just unfold one of those and just.
Yes, I just, take the napkin, John, cut the white part out. You're good to go ahead, John.
And everybody's got the same color, so I can't call anybody out.
Except what I'm recorded.
So where's most of your land at from the city?
In the side circle.
I got a big operation, don't you?
See where the most dots are, I'll just add to it.
You say north, have one north.
You just put all
No,
the.
not Mark.
I know, I'll pad my own ideas.
I don't know.
Surprise School District, started in 1885.
This one did?
No, it's Surprise School District, reformed.
Oh.
They're not school district, but
That one.
community school.
Yeah.
Started in 1885. The only reason I know is my son used to take it to the schoolhouse and we interviewed or.
Did you put 2 on the same? Did you put 2 on the same?
So is the school still on?
That's cheating.
And
Is it on your name?
it's on our renter's land.
Is it?
It's his dog. He was gonna put 2 on the same one. Oh.
And they got
I guess
grades,
it's very
grades of
interesting.
different people. And the one thing they had, writing, reading,
Next time now.
It was a good thing that we got to have the presentation
My great long great
from
grandfather
Local
was
people,
doing one.
because I can't sit with the lights off for that long. I get up at 4:15 in the morning, I felt myself start to drink off, and I might have nodded off during a little bit of it, and I'm like, oh my God, I was afraid that you noticed that I can't.
Do I need to?
You turn off the lights and I'm gonna go out. I know. Yeah, I get up at 4:15.
I am like a horrible snacker.
Oh, I know. Can't we bring fruits? I think they're the
Better
worst.
I'm an expert snacker, how we
I
gonna.
was gonna say, if you're like me, when you're way overweight, it's a horrible snack.
Yeah, I don't know.
My kids know every crook and cranny that I have treats.
Yeah, and he sent it to me.
How do they get in a ride? They go, I'm hungry.
The little one. She's hungry every
During harvest, my lunchbox will always get cleaned out whenever they get in the coffee.
They like when we got go out to golf, because Deb brings the best shots. The one whole side of my bag is full of nothing but food.
All right, so just a quick review. The one with the most dots was 6, and it were the 2 that had something to do with budget, an analysis, and an annual plan review. Several with 5. One with 5 was things to do with culture and communication. The other one with 5 was a curriculum plan, prioritization, some sort of analysis of why your scores are the way they are. And then with 3 was a transportation issue, which you'll need to get more clarification on that. And with 2 was annual review and assess our goals and our expectations. This one did not get any, but I'm almost see that culture, increased community awareness in school, of the school.
Didn't they kind of go with that number 3 down there?
Yeah, it kind of goes by
This one here.
number.
Yeah, I think it does, yeah, when I saw that, so I think that one fits well
Yep.
right there. All right, so I'll put all this information together, then it's gonna have, obviously, some great conversation around the board table on what exactly this means. So he'll have some direction. Obviously, it's not just you, you're gonna have to get some help, but you're the one that has to lead these goals. All right, so the very last thing, pretty quick little thing, in your groups, again, if you will come up with 5 expectations you have of your superintendent. Now, expectations are different. Expectations are the things that you wish him to either perform or be able to demonstrate through his whole 12-year tenure. Now, I'm going to give you 2 that come up every time, so if you want to use them, fine, but they're going to come up even if I didn't tell you. So an example is, you want him to be visible within your communities, all right? You don't want him to just be visible during his first year. An expectation is to be visible during his whole tenure. An effective communicator, not just an effective communicator his first year. So 5 expectations from this group, 5 expectations. He's in the process, well, he's actually already written his and we'll review, so this is our last little deal. But it's fast and it's a visual.
Yeah,
And everybody's part of it. It's not just you.
and that has been, I was gonna say, over time, is that it's just more of like this is, that's what we, well, will they get you down and they just stop communication? Yes. The visibility. Because if they're not part of the community, then it's hard for them to get people to buy into it.
Don't make a rash. Don't make it. I want you to think, time, yeah, do you think it's confident?
And actually try to just make those tough decisions. That's kind of your. And then you just make it so that you're writing it. And that way it's all time. Right, right, yeah. And I love this stuff. I mean, just communication with good, yes.
Because like you said, can't go in the hall, feel like she got all
Some of those things like things you could.
Well, I think that that was.
Shouldn't have been.
let her go.
No, I think that power, like, personalities and all the culture of the board.
But I think
Was
it's
like,
like, that's not
friction.
Like you said, it's like, yes,
You know, sometimes even when it's hard so hard, we have to have those conversations. And I think that sometimes he will. Yes, be willing to have those.
well, and some of that,
You know, and
Yeah.
in that transition,
sometimes I,
because I wasn't sure where exactly.
like when we make some recommendations, I let you know why we made that. And we just say that, like in current talking about being the youngest person, I like people to have something to look at and to know that we're making these decisions.
Information
Yes.
behind why we're making it up.
Well, and that would be on us.
two.
He would probably have to put together what these things should be on some sort of.
Right, yes, right.
It takes a little bit longer before you get it.
Yes.
That's
Hopefully on, yeah, well,
That's what
it's
they'll do.
moving, yeah.
You're gonna.
Feedback is always expectations.
Yeah, you will.
Okay.
That has something to do with short.
Is it?
Miracles.
So they have looked at it, we'll just take it.
We're struggling, we're struggling.
This is ours.
We don't want to take the list of everybody.
Absolutely, yeah, that was good. It's long, but at least he knows what it means.
But then stand by positions.
Filter information that's necessary.
That's
already.
There we go.
Done it a few times.
Filter.
Are you guys?
Yes, there's our.
And I think TJ's got one more, he's trying to, at least trying to clarify one a little bit, so.
Okay, got it.
I'm gonna let TJ finish his and then we'll report out. Mr. Crenshaw, I don't know how to turn that projector off, because it can be turned off if you want it to be. Feel good about it, TJ? Okay. So we'll have this group over here, and I'll take those once again, but, Mr. Crenshaw, you definitely need to listen here, because you're gonna need to know what these mean, because this is what they expect of you, and you don't have a choice. You don't. I mean, you really don't, you don't. But you also know that. All right, so they are.
So there will be hard decisions, we want you to be confident in your decisions. And weapons, just go with it. If it's wrong, we'll figure it out later. Take care of business and inform the board of the results. Just take care of business. Assist in streamlining the agenda. And bring our district together. LES, Lincoln Junior Senior High, and the board office work to bring them all together. We are one district, we're not in competition.
So he may need to have more, or he may know what that means, and I don't, but, okay. Thank goodness I don't have to know. All right, so, this group here, did you feel comfortable with what you heard? Okay, so TJ, or somebody, if you would please report
We'll let you
yours.
go this time.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Physical and community school. Like I said, that's gonna also come up. Communication, good communication with the board. Firm leadership, and I know I'm going to get kind of lengthy when I'm trying to get working on it. But being a good leader, it has the ability to gather information from parties that are involved in a decision, analyze and make recommendations that are in the USD 298's best interest.
It may be lengthy, but it does explain what they meant. I mean, I think it does a good job of that. So did you guys have any questions for this?
Your index.
Mr. Crenshaw, let me hold yours up, and if you would report those, but I'll hold them up so they can see them while you're reading them off. So, as you well know, this is difficult. You obviously don't have to follow expectations, because you, as a collective group, are his supervisor. But to get things started off, his expectations of the board are the following.
Yeah, and I apologize for left-handed writing it. That's what we'll call it. Confidentiality is big because as we move forward with some challenges, we're going to talk about a lot of sensitive and confidential information. It just really needs to stay tight. Preparation for board meetings, it kind of goes into the streamlining idea. If the packets are out and the studying can be done beforehand, then we can limit discussion at the actual meeting, except for maybe questions or clarifications. And then questions in advance. I can get information before we have to have lengthy discussions. If you prep through the packet and say, what about this, what about that? looks like we're getting there with this exercise, but just knowing what your priorities are for me, so that I know exactly what to put 80% of my time on. And then this was brought up actually in Mr. Sechrist's meeting that we had in Hayes, and he said it's kind of like the no surprise policy. Don't surprise me, I won't surprise you. We'll have conversations and communications before we have meetings, so that we're not doing a gotcha kind of a thing, or somebody's looking like they're scrambling for answers.
So, board members, is there any questions about these? So you understand? So, Madam President, I would never ask you, I'm not expecting a vote, but does the board feel like you have a good understanding of these, just like you need to have of yours? Okay. Thank you. All right. So, and this might help the board president if at some point these aren't occurring, but the majority of the board feels that you at least have a talking point. Remember, we were going to be prepared, we agreed to that, so it kind of gives you an opportunity. All right. So, thank you for this. We're basically done, but what I want you to, I did inform you about 2 evaluations a year. These, we think that the most important things about a superintendent eval is how well are they leading you towards your goals. Now, whether you have long-term goals or short-term goals, we know you at least have some short-term, which could end up being long-term. And then the expectations you have of them, are they conforming to those expectations? I will put all this information together. I will put it in evaluation form. It might be a good evaluation for the first one. I would never say it's deep enough, or once it gets more into the job, but I'll put it in evaluation form, so if the board chooses to use it, you can. Remember, the board, whatever they say the superintendent evaluation is what it is. We hope it's valuable to you and to him, but I'll put it in, and the board can either use it or use it as an extension of what you're already doing, or not use it. But I'll put it in form so you can use it if you so choose. So the 60th day of the first semester is when, and that's, like I said, the 3rd week of October. So if you wait till the October board meeting, it's probably too late, because you need to be talking as a board to how to do that. I'm going to put 5 different components on how to score it, basically from not demonstrated to distinguished. So there'll be 5. 7 board members. What we would suggest to the board is that you go through the evaluation, and Mr. Larson may look at that. He may have distinguished on one. He may have not getting there, not demonstrated. And then the middle score would be the final score. So you would count in from those 5, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, wherever that 4th one is. If it happens to be distinguished or not demonstrated or not meeting standards. Now, you might say, now we do have some outliers. We have some people that don't think you're doing very well, but your median score is this. That way, everybody still has a voice, but you don't have the one that says it's really bad, but you have 3 that are really good. So, there's something weird there. That's why the median score is much better than the average score when it comes to evaluation. All right, so with that, I am concluded, and it looks like you get to go to executive session. I'm out of here before that. So, thank you guys.
Thank you very much. If you have any questions for Gary?
Yeah. I'll get these probably to Greta and Mr. Crenshaw before the end of the week, and then obviously I would hopefully that you'll get copies of that, and then you'll have great conversations as a result.
Perfect, thank you. All right. Does anybody need a short break before we go into executive session? Yes, okay.